Hey kids, what time is it?
Hey, it's Edson with GeekTime TV, and coming back to continue my deep dive into Dune Part 2, the movie Dune Part 2. So this is Part 2 of Dune Part 2, because there was just so much material in the first to do it all in one video. Um, and it's been about well over 2 months now that the movie's been out. Did very well, I believe, over 700 million worldwide. So definitely, I believe, yeah, definitely Warner Brothers has given the green light to do a third movie, which Denis Villeneuve is working on. In terms of the script, definitely they're nowhere near where they're going to be start shooting yet, but he said he's working on the script and all that. But so definitely heavy. It is a deep dive into it. Heavy spoilers for this movie and for the book, just to let you know, in case someone still hasn't gotten a chance to watch the movie. So just wanted to know that there's a lot of spoilers. And at the end of the my first video, which was about halfway through the movie, there was a scene with Princess Erlen and Reverend Mother Mahayam. They're talking about the situation in Arrakis and whether there might be a possibility that any of the Atreides survived the attack there, and whether Paul might be dead or alive. And the Reverend Mother tells the Erlen, even if Paul is dead, we know he was like our kind of like prime candidate to become, as part of the breeding program. We manipulated to become kind of like the super being. It's okay if he's dead because we have other candidates, which leads perfectly into the next scene, which is the introduction of Feyd-Rautha, played by Austin Butler, because Feyd-Rautha happens to be their other candidate for this, for them to come up with a kind of like a advanced being from their breeding program. In the book, Feyd-Rautha is not one of those candidates. He's kind of like a stepping stone of their breeding program. I believe that like the next in like if Fate is matched up with another person that they want in their breeding program, that then the next person, the child of theirs, would be kind of like a candidate. But it makes sense actually in the movie that Feyd-Rautha is like one of those to compare with Paul, because then you want to have a worthy adversary, so that leading up to kind of like a final battle against Paul, you want this, you want Fade to be that person. So it makes perfect sense for them to do it this way. This is like just a visually spectacular scene. The introduction of him, he's fighting in an arena. This is all perfectly how Fade is, like a showmanship. He wants to show everyone how good he is at fighting. It's all he kind of lives for, kind of like that. This arena scene is spectacular. You could see, it's like when I was watching this in the theaters, like with the crowd of the arena, my seat was shaking. It was almost like I was there watching, and it shows, like I said, a perfect introduction to Fade, showing how good he is. And he there is what they would normally do is that they would the prisoners or the other gladiators that he would fight, they normally like drug them to maybe like slow them down a little bit, so that because you don't want to take a risk that he is definitely going to die. This is all fights to the death, and he is the next in line to take over, after the Baron. He's the Baron's like heir. So what they would do is they would kind of give him an edge by drugging the prisoners. But when he goes up against this one prisoner, I believe his name is Lanville, and who's a survivor from the Atreides massacre, this becomes like a very critical that he was not drugged, and so this is kind of like more serious than his usual fights. And of course, he overcomes them, and he has like Fate even has a sense of honor in that he compliments him that he was a worthy opponent, and of course he kills him. Afterwards, he's angry at his father, at his uncle, the Baron, who he suspects made sure that he wasn't that the prisoner wasn't drugged. One of the prisoners wasn't drugged, and he was kind of like blaming him. It's like, oh, you wanted someone to kill me. What's going on here? And he's like complaining about it. And the Baron tries to placate him by saying, you know what, if put that aside. If you play your cards right, you could be, you're in a position where you could gain a lot of power, maybe even the throne of the emperor. And the way he puts that forward to try to kind of get Feyd back on his side is that he says, you know, we're gonna go and take control of the Arrakis situation. Finally put down this Fremen rebellion, and then the Baron tells him he has a plan that he'll get rid of the emperor by telling them, look, the emperor was involved in this betrayal of the Atreides in the attack. So that get the other great houses against the emperor, and thereby trying to get Feyd to the throne. But that really doesn't make any sense here. Of course, it's very different from the book, so it doesn't make any sense here because by admitting that the emperor was part of that attack, yeah, the emperor did betray the Atreides. He wasn't supposed to be doing that, and that would get the houses against him. But he himself, the Harkonnens themselves, were involved in that. So that's not going to get them to like Feyd any better as a replacement because they themselves were. It's more likely the great houses would, the rest of the empire would just turn on the Harkonnens and the emperor at the same time. So this plan doesn't really make sense, but it does work that Feyd is just okay. I'm good with that. There's a big celebration in the city over his victory, and Feyd finds himself all alone in looks like the palace, and we have get introduced. I believe we get introduced to this character. Maybe she was before. Did she appear early in the movie? I'm not sure. I'm trying to remember. Lady Margot Fenring, which is a Bene Gesserit. She's just like Jessica. She's very advanced in the Bene Gesserit training, and you see what her assignment is for the Bene Gesserit. So she with the use of her kind of like feminine wiles and then the Bene Gesserit voice, she clearly gets control of manipulating Feyd very quickly, and she actually administers that Gom Jabbar test that Mohayim did to Paul at the beginning of the movie, not part, yeah, in part of Dune Part 1, at the beginning of the Dune story. Mohayim uses that Gom Jabbar, which is that needle that will kill him if he can't withstand certain enough pain. So Lady Margot actually administers this same test on Feyd, which makes perfect sense because if he is one of those people that the Bene Gesserit are depending on to become like this part of their breeding program, the ultimate super being, then it would make sense that he would have to also pass this test. And obviously he does pass it because later on we see Lady Margot talking to Mohayim saying he passed the test, and also and she also tells Mohayim that she has secured his bloodline, even if something were to happen in one of his in this kind of like war with the Fremen and the Atreides, or one of his fights in the arena, she secured his bloodline, thereby telling the audience that afterward, we don't see this in the movie, but after she did the Gom Jabbar test, she obviously seduced him. And as I've said before, the Bene Gesserit have a lot of abilities, one of which is being able to either allow themselves to get pregnant or not, and also choose to be pregnant with a boy or a girl. And she actually tells Mohayim, yeah, I have basically saying she's pregnant with a girl from Feyd. So they're just trying to hedge their bets that if somehow something were to happen to Feyd, then she has his bloodline by having his child. So after that, and then after that, the Baron basically makes Feyd the new puts him in charge of Arrakis so that he could go and take control of the situation, because obviously Raban isn't doing anything about or isn't being very successful with the Fremen. And going back to Arrakis, we finally get to see Gurney Halleck. He did survive the initial attack from part one, and he has gotten in with these smugglers, which is basically like they're kind of very neutral. They're not for the Fremen, they're not against the Fremen, they're not for Harkonnens. They're just trying to get the precious spice and make a living by selling it. You smuggle it out of there and you sell it to the highest bidder, which anyone would take. So he's gotten in with the smugglers. He's not trying to be a smuggler, but it's just his way of like hanging around because he wants the revenge on the Harkonnens and especially Beast Raban. And him and his band of smugglers fall into a trap by the Fremen, which led by Paul. And Paul, it's this big reunion between Paul and Gurney because they didn't know each of them were alive. Paul then introduces Gurney to Stilgar and the rest of the Fremen, and Gurney realizes now what's been going on. He's heard all this stuff about the Fremen being gotten so much better against the Harkonnens, and he realizes that Paul is a key factor in all of this, and he's like, and he realizes that the Fremen are looking for him to take on kind of like this messianic role, being the Lisan al-Gaib, and Paul is very reluctant, and he's like, but Gurney's like, why aren't you doing that? You could easily take this fighting force, and we could take the Harkonnens and right now. But Paul is very reluctant. And this is kind of in line with the book, because in the book Paul struggles a lot with the visions that he's getting. There are certain visions that he gets of the future where if he makes the wrong decision here in Arrakis, it may lead to like a holy war where like a lot of people are just gonna get killed, under the Atreides banner, because if enough, Fremen become, if it's like kind of like a religious fanatical war, that this may turn into like a, where it just turns on everybody, and he just doesn't, he's always struggling with these visions because he's like, I don't want to make the decision to do this. This is not right. I would never want the Atreides name to be known as someone who just has this war across the empire and killing all these people. It's like he's constantly saying this. He wants to disengage from that. So he's struggling with this. And so then Gurney reveals that he knows where the family atomics are. This, I guess, just comes out of nowhere. This whole thing doesn't make sense to me about the family atomics and Gurney knowing where, the only one who knows it. Yes, every house has has atomics. But Duke Leto would definitely have told Paul where they are. I mean, Paul is his heir, so that would be somebody. So it makes no sense that Gurney is the only one who knows, because what would happen if both Leto and Gurney died, and no one would know it? Like, he would at least, I think, would let people like Duncan and Paul and Jessica know that, especially Paul, who he trusted with everything. So it makes no sense to me, but Gurney leads them to the atomics, which he's trying to get them to use it against the Harkonnens as a way to defeat them. I've heard this from other people on podcasts who are like just podcasts for Dune in general, saying this actually makes better sense than the book because, in the book, Paul knows where the atomics are, but he never uses them. So this makes sense that he would know, because why wouldn't he use them in the book? Well, the thing is, what people need to remember, and this comes from the book, is that from kind of Dune and the whole Dune books in general, is that there is something called the Great Convention, which was kind of like a treaty that by all the great houses came up to agreement that one of the stipulations was that atomics are never supposed to be used against other humans. It's just something that you don't do, and everybody's prevented from using atomics against other people. That's just the way it is. I mean, everybody knows that all the families have these atomics in somewhere, but it's kind of like a deterrent in case other people attack them, because no one is supposed to be using him because of this great convention. And that explains why in the book Paul knows where they are, but he never uses them, because he even after his family gets betrayed by the emperor, gets attacked by Iraq by Harkonnens, is on the run and all that, he still is not going to defy the Great Convention. Now, someone will undoubtedly say, well, you're wrong, because he does use them in the book, but that doesn't go against the Great Convention, and I will get to this point later on in the video when there is one time where he uses them. But he will not break this. He's still very honorable on that, despite everything that's going on. So bear with me on that one. Then we see Feyd-Rautha taking charge of the Harkonnen forces in Arrakis, and he immediately goes and attacks Sietch Tabr. Gets the Fremen on the run, makes immediate impact. Just establishes a counterattack. He's like, enough of what's going on. Stop trying to let the Fremen stop us with the spice mining. We gotta like do whatever it takes to stop them. There's even a scene where he has a captured Fremen, Shashakli, where she was introduced earlier as one of Chani's friends. And there is a Shashakli in the book, but it's a man, not a woman. So obviously, the character here has been gender swapped for some reason. It's a very small part. The character only appears I believe, in one scene in the book, where he kind of he's the one that gives Paul the hooks so that he can be successful in riding the worm, basically. But in this case, in the movie, the character has been turned into a woman and given a little bit bigger part. But in this scene, after the attack and destruction of Sietch Tabr, which puts the Fremen on the run, Shashakli is captured, and Feyd demonstrates why he is like someone who is to be feared, being ruthless, and he basically puts the flamethrower on her, and that's the end. So you don't see a lot of this in the book, meaning Feyd taking charge of the Harkonnens and getting successful attacks on the Fremen. You don't see a lot of this, but I actually agree with this change, because you want to make Feyd kind of like a very worthy adversary, which would increase the importance of the fight at the end. He's got to be this very worthy adversary for Paul to make the stakes so high at the end when he fights him. So it does make perfect sense, and I agree, and I like the fact that the movie does show a lot more of Feyd than the book actually did. So that I actually do agree with this. Then we see Paul taking the water of life. Now, there's an earlier scene where Jessica is at the temple where they make the water of life. She's there with a caretaker, and at some point, only women are supposed to be there. Men are never allowed there, because the water of life is just instantly fatal to them. So only women are allowed at that. But Jessica tells the caretaker that when you see someone coming, to let him in, and she's obviously hoping that Paul comes and takes the water of life, which, again, as I said in my earlier video, my part 1 video, it makes no sense why Jessica in this movie is encouraging Paul to take the water of life. She knows it's going to be a certain death for him. She would never want to do that, but in this case, she wants, and it's the whole thing about where she wants him to do this final step so that he can take on this messianic, become the Lisan al-Gaib. He wants to be the Messiah, to gain more power with the Fremen, thinking that once he takes the water of life, that's it. The Fremen will just follow him anywhere and do whatever he wants. It kind of goes against what the book, because that is not why Paul takes the water of life. It's not because he wants to take on the role of a Messiah. There's a different reason. And so in the book, going back to when he has a reunion with Gurney Halleck, unbeknownst to Paul and Jessica, Gurney, all this time he's been thinking that Jessica was actually the ones who betrayed the Atreides, not Dr. Yui. And you would never know if you're just watching the movie. You in both the Dune Part One and Dune Part Two, you would never know this. So um, uh, there's no way you could have known this, but there's a reason why. So in the book, there's the Atreides intercept a communication between a Harkonnen communication that points to that Jessica may be a traitor, and in their midst is going to help them take over the Atreides. So that is Duke Leto surmises that that's just a trick to try to get them to infighting, to try to get him to mistrust Jessica. He gets that right away. It's just like, but what he does is he makes it look like to that he actually is thinking about is that's like he's struggling with it because he's hoping that Harkonnens will like kind of give more away of their plan. So he makes it look like to like Gurney and Duncan and Thufir, like, okay, let's keep an eye on Jessica because that she may be the traitor. But only to Paul, he secretly tells him, look, this is a Harkonnen trick. They're just trying to get us to attack each other, to make us weak. In case something happens to me, I want you to tell your mother that I never once suspected that she was a traitor. But people like Gurney, they don't know this. So all this time he's been thinking in his head Jessica was a traitor. So now he finds out that Jessica is alive along with Paul, and he doesn't let Paul know anything because he just figures Jessica has manipulated Paul. And when they have the reunion, when Paul leads him back to Jessica, he immediately comes up. He takes them both by surprise. Immediately comes up behind her and has a knife at her throat and is about to kill her for betraying the Atreides. Of course, Paul and Jessica are completely taken by surprise, and Paul's like, "Nope, that's not who it is. It's Dr. Yui." Gurney doesn't believe it at all. He's knows it. He's convinced it's Jessica, and the only reason why he doesn't kill her right away is he trying to force her to admit to her son that she's the traitor before he kills her. But Paul tells him this is how he convinces Paul convinces Gurney that she is not the traitor by telling him that there's no way this person that Jessica could be the traitor because you don't know, you weren't there all those nights, all those late nights when Jessica thought he was sleeping, where she was just crying herself to sleep all night long. In terms of missing Duke Leto, in terms of mourning him, he knows that those emotions were genuine, and he's able to basically tell Gurney, you don't know just how much she suffered over the death of Duke Leto. There's no way she could have betrayed him. Dr. Yui is the traitor. So finally, it's a very emotional scene, which I wish that, like, when I was reading the book over and over again, I always wished that this would be a scene that would be on the screen if someone were ever to make an adaptation. But of course, it's not. It's a lot of people say there's not a lot of emotions in Dune. It's very clinical. It's like, and I differ completely because, and this is one of the examples. I'm not explaining it right, but this is a very if anyone can go back and reread this or read it for the first time, it's a very emotional scene between mother and son, admitting that just how much Jessica mourned over Duke Leto, and of course it convinces Gurney that she was not the traitor. The reason why I'm telling you all this, basically, in terms of getting back to the water of life, is that was the main reason why Paul finally, that was not the main reason, but that was like the final straw that gets Paul to actually take the water of life, because he's thinking, well, my visions are totally unreliable here. I never knew this was, like, I had no inkling that Gurney was going to do that. He almost killed my mother, and I never knew that was coming. Like, what other future possibilities am I not getting from my visions that are going to make me cause me to make critical errors in my decisions in this time? It's like, what am I missing here? So that was kind of like the catalyst that gets him to finally decide to take the water of life, because he needs to make sure his visions are more reliable, make sure that they're that they're more sound, and make sure he's getting all his critical information. So because all his decisions going forward, they're threading a very fine line, because so many possibilities is that they're just going to get destroyed by the Harkonnens and the Emperor, and he needs to have the all the information he needs to make the right decision. So finally, he goes and secretly takes the water of life. In the book, Jessica does not want him to do that at all. She just doesn't want him to kill himself, and he does take the water of life, and he goes into a coma for like it's like a death-like coma. He's barely alive. The water of life. He's barely survives it, and he's like in a coma for like 3 weeks. And Jessica's like has no clue why he's in a coma. She doesn't know that he secretly took the water of life, and she finally calls Chani to come help, because Chani, again, you don't get this in the book because the movie skips over the 2+ year time gap. But in the book, Chani actually gets pregnant with Paul's child and has a child. And so in Fremen tradition, the mothers are all way deep into the south where they're perfectly safe, making sure that the birth and the children are safe. So, but Jessica has no choice but to call Chani back to the where Paul and the Fremen are fighting, because just has no clue what's happening to Paul. He's been in a coma for like 3 weeks, and just has no idea to revive him. And Chani does figure out that he took the water of life, because I mean Paul and her talk about all these things, and there's like the Chani is the closest person that Paul has once he starts that relationship. So she does deduce that he's in a coma because of the water of life, and she figures out that by putting like a drop of the water of life just on his lips, not have him consume it, but just put on his lips, causes him to kind of get revived, and that's how it happens in the book. In the movie, they try to kind of like, make it somewhat like that, but not really. So in the movie, he's just taking the water of life because he's finally like, okay, I have to take the final step to do this, so that the Fremen would just come and believe that I'm like the Lisan al Gaib, the Messiah that's going to take him. So the only way they're going to kind of like full get behind me is if I take the water of life, which is a kind of like a complete change from what you see in the other part. In this movie, he's constantly telling Chani, look, I don't want anything to do with being your savior. I'm just want to be part of being one of the Fremen, just fighting alongside. I don't want to be the person that leads the Fremen or anything like that. And all of a sudden he has like a complete change. So it kind of doesn't make sense in the movie that he does this, but of course he has to get there before the end of the movie, so he does. And he also goes into a coma. Of course in the movie it's only like for, I don't know, like a few hours. And Chani does come, and everybody knows it's because he took the water of life, but Chani comes and they have her use one of her tears and mixture of water of life to revive him. It makes no sense to me. Then, not that I know everything about not that I know all about what makes sense in terms of the water of life either, but it's very different. And she immediately, and then as soon as Paul is revived and she knows that he's okay, she kind of just slaps him and goes away, which is again, and goes. It's another thing about how different movie Chani is from book Chani, because she in the book she's just completely with him, and they're all in this together in terms of like they agree with all the major decisions, and she's very loyal and supportive is the word I was trying to say. But of course in the movie it has to be different, which is, I don't know why. Anyways, that's my whole water of life thing, book and movie. Movie one doesn't really make sense, but that's the thing that not everyone, but kind of Stilgar and the southern fanatical Fremen were trying to push him into doing this, because it's the kind of like a final step in to take on this Messiah role. And then after that, he kind of like there's this scene with like the 1,000 Fremen are gathered. Like they saw that he did it. He's accomplished this last thing. They know now There's this really incredible scene where he's kind of like walking amongst the Fremen, and they kind of like part around him. It's kind of like almost like the parting of water or something, but it's like he's walking amongst like this crowd of Fremen, and they part around them because now they've like deferred to him as this kind of like this prophecy that has come true. And he gives this like really rousing speech to go just so that they can go and with their final battle against the Harkonnens and the Emperor. And it's a great scene in terms of Timothy Chalamet really kills it. It's you really kind of like just believe it. But again, in the book, Paul does not gain this leadership because he's trying to be a messiah. He gains the leadership because over the course of 2 to 3 years, he leads them in defeating the Harkonnens at every turn, and he fights. He shows them how strong he is and how what a good fighter he is, and that's what they respect. So a little bit different, but same thing in terms of just them like agreeing that he should be the leader that takes him into that final battle. And then they go on to by this time the Emperor has come to Arrakis to try to take control of the situation because spice production has fallen and the whole empire relies on spice production. So the Emperor has come with his fighting force to Sardaukar, and he's stationed over at the Arakan city where the main headquarters of the Harkonnen forces are, and Paul leads the Fremen into the final battle. The only other thing I was going to remember is there's this ridiculous scene where I think Paul is still trying to convince everyone, and he's with the Council of Elders where they're like some people are still doubtful, and he tells them like certain things about certain secretive things about their personal lives, like showing that he has these powers of vision, and that's how he tries to convince them, which is kind of ridiculous because that's not how Paul convinces them by giving them secret visions or anything like that. He's more like coming from a position of strength for them. So then we get to this kind of final battle, and here let me go back to the whole atomics thing. Remember I said there's this agreement called the Great Convention where all the great houses are prevented from using atomics against humans. So Paul does use in the book. Paul does use the family atomics one time, and that is not against humans. He uses them to destroy this mountain that's basically a natural physical barrier that protects the Arakan city, which is it's like a kind of like a natural shielding. So he totally surprises them by using the atomics to take down the mountain. That way, he's able to lead the Fremen on top of the worms and kind of overwhelm the Harkonnen and Sardaukar forces. It's like a completely, like they totally didn't expect this at all for them to do it. Not only using the atomics, but using the atomics correctly, because he's not using atomics against other humans. He's using it against like a natural construction, so against the mountains. So he's able to still stay within the Great Convention, but this kind of like it's almost like where we went back way back at the beginning where I was talking about the Emperor playing chess. Well, he completely outmaneuvers the Emperor. No one sees this coming. Both the taking down of the mountain, opening up full to get into Arakan city with worms, and the Fremen on top of the worms completely overwhelm the Sardaukar, the remaining Harkonnens, and the final battle isn't as big as this big climactic battle because of Paul's tactics here. It's very pretty much one-sided. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's visually stunning. There's a lot of great scenes in terms of Fremen and battling against Sardaukar, and you see the worms come in. It's great scenes, but the battle itself is a lot one-sided. There is one thing that happens in this battle that doesn't happen in the book, which I kind of like, and that is Gurney Halleck gets a chance to find Raban and kill him. And I alluded earlier in the video about him staying on Arrakis for revenge. And basically, what you don't get, I don't think you get from that's from the movie, but so when Gurney was much younger, he was a prisoner in Gidi Prime under the Harkonnens, and it was Beast Raban who actually, with his whip, gave him the scar on his face, killed Gurney's family. Definitely, I'm not sure if it was entire family, but definitely tortured and killed his sister. And this was kind of like he finally does get his revenge on Beast Raban. You don't see this in the book, but I kind of very much agree that he did get his revenge finally, or at least if you don't want to call it revenge, get back at the person who did all these things to him and his family. So that was a good touch. You also see Paul, after the main forces of the Sardaukar and Harkonnens are taken care of. Paul comes into where the emperor is, and he sees the Baron just laying there because he's lost the power to the suspensors that are supposed to keep him up, and he basically kills him outright. Just it's kind of like a very not climactic at all, though, and which is okay, because in the book the Baron also gets just killed very quickly, not by Paul. In the book, it's actually Aaliyah, Paul's sister, as a little child, that kills the Baron. But of course, in the movie, you know that Aaliyah is still in the womb; he hasn't been born yet. So, if you're going to do it this way, it kind of makes sense that it's Paul who does kill him. Then he goes up to the emperor and he gives him the terms. The way your way out of this is, if I marry Irulan and become emperor. But before that, or maybe in the middle of that, I'm trying to remember whether his terms to the emperor before or after. There is one last scene, and what I call it's even, I think this scene is more climactic than the actual battle. I mean, I guess you could put them both together and make one two climactic battles. One is in terms of beating the armies of the Harkonnen and the Sardaukar, and this is Paul's personal battle against the final enemy, Feyd-Rautha, which of course it makes perfect sense that we've been trying to make Feyd a very worthy adversary throughout this part 2 of the movie, just so that this could be a climactic battle. And I really love this scene. This is really done very well. It's great choreography. You see, you realize that it really is a risk. Paul could easily be killed here, because you know how good of a fighter Feyd is. You know that he's ruthless, and everything that you see about him up till now shows you that he's like a very worthy adversary, even to the point of with the Bene Gesserit think he's equal to Paul, and that's it's a great scene. It's the last scene that you see, but that Paul has to get past, and then he does kill Feyd, and of course then he basically forces the emperor to give up his throne by kind of like by agreeing to marry Irulan is a way to do it that also fulfill all the kind of like the forms that the empire has without more bloodshed or anything like that. It kind of makes it more legitimate type thing. There are shots during this fight here, and especially when Paul says he's going to marry Irulan to take the throne. You see shots of Chani clearly being very hurt and anguish, which is kind of like, it does show you that she, despite all her disagreeing with him and a lot of things, it does show she does have deep feelings for him. Again, it's it's a big contradiction that happens in this movie, because she's not supposed to have that big of a contradiction. I mean, yes, she, in the relationship with Paul, she considers himself every bit as equal. He hears her opinions in her viewpoints, and he values her viewpoints, and before making his decisions, and even they make decisions together. But ultimately, she also knows that he has these powers that gives him special. It gives him like inkling of what things might. He knows other things that are going on more than her, so she does defer to him to make decisions that she may not understand, and she is supportive of him. So much better in the book than in the movie, where it's like kind of like a complete contradiction. And it's basically my biggest problem with this movie is the character of Chani, which is so different. Um, and then after this, after Paul declares himself that he's going to become the emperor, in the movie, this in the book, this it basically comes to like an ending, and it's kind of like a real, real ending. Nothing else happening here, and that's, the Fremen are finally not slaves anymore. They're not being constantly hunted anymore. They have their planet is theirs again. Paul has made everything right. Has The Harkonnens have been taken care of. The Emperor has been taken care of, and everything is. But in this, and I get in this movie, they do want to set up for a third movie, which is based on Frank Herbert's second book, Dune Messiah. So they have additional scenes after this, after Paul's declaration is that he gets word that the other great houses do not agree that he's the emperor, and so they decide that they now have to go to war. The Fremen have to go to war with them, to establish that, and you see these scenes with the Fremen kind of rallying and getting on ships, and it just it's kind of weird seeing like the Fremen who have all just been like kind of like living with the desert and surviving the desert. All of a sudden, you see them jumping on ships that are taking them off world. But there you have it. Because I do get that you want to set up the next movie, and of course you get that final thing where Shani is not uh, part of the Paul's loyal forces. She's out there in the desert, and she goes off in a different direction. You don't know what's happening with her, and there you have it. The thing is, knowing what happens in Dune Messiah, knowing what happens in Dune Messiah, the second book, which the third movie is supposed to be based on, and seeing the differences in this movie from the book, most especially the character of Chani, who plays a major part in Dune Messiah, but completely different than what you see her in this movie. It's very hard for me to think that the next movie is going to be um, really good with the source material. I hope it's not just going to be where they slap the name Dune Messiah on it and go and make up a totally different story based on what happened. Now, the only hope that I have is that there was a scene here that I didn't talk about at the end here, where Jessica notices Chani goes off, and then Paul tries to reassure her, I guess, and says, "Is like, don't worry, she'll come back. She'll come back to me. I have seen it." So it tells you that there's some kind of vision that he sees where Chani does have a reconciliation with him, and maybe there is a way to make it make sense in the next movie. But again, it's hard for me to think that. But I'm open to it. I'll certainly be open to seeing what Denis Villeneuve does with it, to see if he make some kind of effort to make it as close to Dune Messiah as possible. But again, there you have it. Again, I totally can see why people who have never read the book went to see this movie and completely love it. Yes, it's spectacular. It's the visuals are spectacular. The editing, the music, sound, the costumes, the choreography, the fight scenes are all great. And I just wish that I had been a little bit, not a, wish I had been closer to the source material, and I would have really liked it. So in watching this movie, every time I watch this movie, it'll always be like two contradictions. Uh, uh, Sides of me always, like, one is like, oh, this looks so great, and the other one is like, well, but it's not, you know it's not Paul and Chani that you've come to like all these years. So hopefully I'm wrong. Maybe it'll be a really good third movie. And I'll, again, like I said, I'm certainly open to it. All right, there you have it. I know I know I missed tons of stuff. I get it. And I'll certainly love to make it more videos about this movie, and certainly about the book and the movie. And I'll more than welcome comments on why you disagree with my takes, and what I've gotten wrong, and why you think the movie is better in some ways than the book. That's fine. It's just my opinion that I really don't like when people write down, oh, the movie version, like the movie version of Chani is better than the book. Well, there's no such thing as the book version. Chani is the actual Chani in the book version, because there would be no character of Chani without Frank Herbert creating her in the book. So there's definitely other versions of Chani like this movie that are very, very different, but you're not trying to compare one version of her to another. That, like, the authentic Chani is the one that's in the book, because there wouldn't be a character of Chani without Frank Herbert coming up with it, as well as other aspects of the book. So, but again, that's just my opinion, because I've read that book so many times, and finally seeing there's been other versions of it. There's actually a TV version of Dune also that out there. It's out on DVD that I would totally recommend people watching it, because it is a lot closer. While it's not as spectacular as this in terms of all the production, it is closer to the book than this is. So I would encourage people to watch that just to make a comparison. Okay, that's it for me. Let me know what you think, and how wrong I was, and I'm more than welcome any kind of discussion with it. And thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for watching GeekTime TV. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe, make sure to check the little bell icon anytime someone from our network drops new content here. Want some GeekTime swag? Check out the merchandise available in the GeekTime TV store, linked in the channel description below. Share GeekTime TV with friends, and as always, thank you for your support. We'll see you soon.